We're back again. SwamiLee's Sports Talk. I'm SwamiLee.
Hello, I am Mellow Mike.
And we're here to talk about something I have no idea what it is. So we're about to find out what we're talking about today. Mike, what you got for us?
Well, before we get to our first topic, let me say that today is a first for SwamiLee's Sports Talk. Namely, I am clean shaven and you are
Oh,
not.
well, the manly growth is back. It only took me 4 months to get it to look anything like that. Yep.
Well, like you, I had some gray around the chin, and so I had to get rid of it.
Ah, dude, I'm old. I mean, all I keep hearing is take just for men. And let me tell you something. No, thank you. I'm old. I'll embrace it. I have no problem. I mean, for heaven's sake, it is what it is. But we deal with it. Not all of us have a head of hair. You're going to die with that head of hair. My God.
Well, I hope so in 40 or 50 years.
Yeah, good luck to you on that. But, so,
So, let me tell you, Lee, our first topic is not Carson Wentz and the Eagles, but it is inspired by them. Last year, Carson Wentz signed a 4-year, $128 million contract with about $107 million guaranteed, and now he's benched in favor of Jalen Hurts. And so, of course, people are already asking, is Carson a bust? And we're not going to talk about Carson right now, but we are going to talk about busts.
okay.
So, before we go there, and you know what? I just made a mistake. That's not our first topic.
The funniest part is I now know where you're going, and that's why I'm laughing so much. I think we just need to skip your first part, and we have to go with the biggest bust of all time. Don't you think? You think we should start with the biggest bust of all time?
Well, no. Before we actually talk about who the biggest bust is, and I was going to limit it to our lifetimes,
Yep.
let's talk about what exactly is a bust in the context of sports.
Well,
And,
again, based on the information that's been provided to me, which is not much information, I still say I know the biggest bust of all time.
well, some people, at least in the Midwest, when they like to talk about busts in sports, they talk about Kajana Carter.
Oh, yes, they do.
The Bengals picked him first in '95, and before he took a snap in a game, he blew out his knees, eventually came back to play, and was not the player that everyone thought he would be based on his time at Penn State. And let me tell you, Lee, that is not a bust.
I agree.
When a player blows out his knees or wrecks it, or when a pitcher wrecks his arm and doesn't live up to expectations, that player is not a bust.
I agree 100%. Hate to say it to you, but injuries are unfortunate. Injuries happen. I think Kajana Carter got hurt twice, I think, if I remember correctly. And you can only expect so much from a player. Ron Jones of the Phillies blew out both knees one at a time. I mean, he's not a bust. The poor guy just had injury problems. God rest his soul. It's one of those situations. Kajana Carter never had a chance, and it's unfortunate.
Well, I'm glad we agree about that. So let's hear from you, Lee. Who is the biggest bust in Philadelphia sports in our lifetime?
Well, that's a tough one because there's, first of all, so many possibilities. And again, I always focus on the Phillies, of course, being a baseball guy more than anything else. I mean, think names like, oops, wrong button. Mike Mamula always comes to mind. Okay, but he still played for a few years. So, I mean, he can't be the biggest bust of all time because he played for a few years.
Yeah, I agree.
From the Phillies standpoint, I mean, we could go on and on and on about player failure because everybody fails. I mean, the Phillies get the wrong brother all the time. They end up getting these pitchers that are supposed to be, studs. And, I mean, Joe Cowley, I mean, I'm not calling him the biggest of all time, but Joe Cowley was a huge, huge bust. Floyd Yeomans was a huge bust. Dominic Brown, if Dominic Brown is not in the top 10 of all time, I don't know who is. Again, I can't really think football as much, so I'm going to pretty much focus on baseball. But just so many. We can go over the first round draft picks for the past 35, 40 years. I mean, think about it. Aaron Nola and as successful first-round picks.
Wasn't Cole Hamels a first-round pick?
He might have been. He might have been. So now, twice in 40 years, they had a good first-round pick.
Of course, Gavin Floyd was, but he didn't succeed until he went to Washington.
And he was very short-lived also. But yes, he had like 2 bad starts in Philly, so they shipped him somewhere else because that's how Phillies handle their players. Let's be honest. I mean, we have Chad McConnell to talk about. Mickey Moniak is going to be a monumental bust, by the way. Okay, I mean, overall number 1 pick. They're probably going to trade him with 2 other players for a middle-inning reliever. You mark those words right now. Okay, Mickey Moniak and 2 prospects for a 34-year-old middle reliever. Because that's what the Phillies do. They're terrible. So, you know what? I have an answer for you, okay?
Please.
The answer is the Phillies front office is the biggest bust in Philadelphia sports history. Their constant failures, one after another, are they're terrible.
Okay, well, that is a very interesting take. I have 2 names in mind, neither of whom are Phillies. And I suppose an easy one would be Sean Bradley, but since we're not hoop guys, all I'll say is he was supposed to revolutionize the game of basketball, and he revolutionized nothing. He collected money. He hurt the Sixers for years to come, and that's it.
No, hang on. I don't know if you paid attention around draft time for Sean Bradley, because I was in the sports. I had a sports shop at the time, so I really paid attention to the prospects because they were so important. For Sean Bradley did not audition for anything, for any team. Okay, all he did was there was a tape, a videotape of him a couple years before when he was at BYU. And
before his mission to China or wherever he went.
Before that, though, there's this tape. I mean, the guy is 7'6", for heaven's sake. Okay, the Sixers fell for it. They said, "Wow, this guy's really tall. He looked good playing against freshmen in college or something like that. We're going to take him." Now, you can't blame him. The kid was 7'6", but the problem is he's probably $180 soaking wet. I mean, and he really didn't know how to play the game of basketball. That whole draft was messed up. The way that whole draft went down, the Sixers just showed that they fell for it, quite simply. Bradley stole their money. It's as simple as that. He was terrible.
And he was, but he was not the biggest bust in Philly sports in our lifetime. That encomium, that honor, goes to a short-time Eagle by the name of Bernard Williams. Do you remember him?
I remember the name, but I got to tell you, was he a first-round pick?
He was a first-round pick in '94. He started 16 games at left tackle. He promised to anchor that line for a decade to come. You know, he made the all-rookie team. And after his rookie season, not only did Rich Kotite leave the Eagles, but Bernard Williams left the Eagles, never to play in the NFL again. Why? Repeated suspensions for drug violations. And considering the fact that he was a first-round pick who had all-pro talent and who let it go to waste because he preferred to smoke pot, he is the biggest bust in Philadelphia sports history.
I don't know. Given a guy who started 16 games in an NFL season, all-time biggest bust, that's a tough one. The Phillies had so many failures. I mean, one after another. First-round picks never making the major leagues, or making the major leagues for 2 weeks. Joe Savory comes to mind. And remember, this is off the top of my head. If I had spent an hour preparing for this, I could give you a list, 2 pages long, just from the Phillies, not the Sixers, Flyers, or the Eagles. One after another. And every year they keep taking a player that just, until Alec Bohm, whatever his name is, he's the first one that really came into his own since Aaron Nola. I mean, that's a lot of years. 4 or 5 years is a lot of years to not have a prospect. I mean, look at Scott Kingery.
I'd rather not.
Exactly.
There's a name I want to ask you about, Lee.
Yes.
And I obviously did not look up the name, and I don't remember it perfectly. I want to see if you do. He was the Phillies' first-round pick around 1980. I believe his name was Drungo Harwood.
Drungo Hayswood was an Oriole. I don't think the Phillies drafted him. He's dead, by the way. Rest in peace, Drungo. Yeah, he was an Oriole. Again, did Drungo Hazewood come up with the Phillies? I never heard that before. But he did come up. He was an Oriole. He played briefly in the early 80s. But not to the best of my knowledge was the first major leaguer named Drungo a Philly, even in the minor league system. But if I'm wrong, wouldn't be the first time.
Well, I obviously did not remember even his name correctly, so thanks for reminding me.
Not a problem, not a problem. So why don't we talk about the biggest bust in the history of Major League Baseball?
Please.
What's that?
Please.
There's only one biggest bust in Major League Baseball, and this person was involved in baseball in the late 70s into the 80s, if memory serves me.
It does.
What's that?
It does serve. You're correct.
It does, and that biggest bust in the history of of Major League Baseball would have to go to, drum roll please, Morgana the Kissing Bandit. I bet many of our watchers will not remember Morgana the Kissing Bandit, but let's just say that she was very well endowed, and she used to run on the field and hug and kiss players like George Brett, Nolan Ryan, and I'm sure Pete Rose at some point in time, though she might be a little old for Pete Rose at the time. Inappropriate, I do realize. Mike, what are your memories of Morgana the Kissing Bandit?
Well, I remember the Nolan Ryan incident. I remember short 70s style shorts and tight t-shirts. I remember thick, bushy blonde hair, and that was not all that was thick about her.
Indeed.
And, I remember, did I see her on This Week in Baseball or just national? I don't remember where I first saw her, but...
She was a celebrity. Back then, things were different. I mean, obviously, you couldn't get away with that today, no matter what you look like. But that's just because that's the way things are in the game. Remember, they used to run on the field after your team won the division or the World Series. Of course,
I remember.
Anymore.
I was at a game with my dad around 2012, and somebody at Citizens Bank Park, ran out into left field, and he was tackled by at least 6 security guards in about 30 seconds.
Yep,
crazy.
And they used to tear the stadiums apart. Without a doubt, they used to tear the stadiums apart, and it's how things have changed. I mean, Disco Demolition Night.
Oh, I remember hearing about it.
Well, we ran into some technical difficulties, so I apologize for that. But we're back. Apologize for that. So
it's all right,
Mike. You had another topic, but we're going to hold off on that one for the moment.
Okay.
We'll catch that for another show. So let's sum up our interesting afternoon here and our show for the folks. We decided the Phillies Eagles have the biggest busts in Major League Baseball, along with Morgana the Kissing Bandit, and we also determined that the Phillies front office probably is the biggest bust in Philadelphia history. What are your final thoughts, Mike?
Well, I'm going to stick with Bernard Williams, who showed that he had all-pro talent, and he decided to piss it all away.
Well, it's always a shame, but again, we could go over Eagles' first-round picks for quite a while also, including, of course, that Mike Mamula, who was the combine superstar and could not translate that to the NFL. But remember, Mamula still played for multiple seasons, and he still did okay. And, again, we could go over just dozens of Phillies draft picks that just weren't any good. So I'm with you. I'm on board. Mike, final words, because we're going to let our folks get back to their busy days. What's your final words?
The final words are that hopefully when we're doing this show in 5 or 10 years, Carson Wentz does not make his way high up that list of Philadelphia busts.
And the sad part, Mike, is it's possible that he could, which is another topic for another day.
Or another year.
Well, hopefully not. Guys, folks, thank you for joining us today here at SwamiLee's Sports Talk. We'll see you next time. I'm SwamiLee.
I'm Mellow Mike. You have a great day.
And we'll see you soon, guys.